Right. Good evening. How is everybody? Doing well? Larry, doing any better? Good. Good. Glad to hear that. If Jay announced this, I missed it, and that's possible because I sleep most of the time anyway. No, it's very possible that I missed it. But the 12th, June the 12th, we'll have an ice cream social after church. If you'd like to make a gallon of ice cream, talk to Suzanne. She'll fix you up. And with that, but we're gonna stay after church and eat a gallon of ice cream. No, might eat a couple of gallons. But we'll eat a little ice cream and sit down and have a little fun. We've got several things going on. And then July 3rd, I believe we've talked about. It's the first Sunday night of the quarter. We have singing. The elders will be talking about this. I'm gonna spoil their thunder, but we're gonna start with light snacks. You know, don't fix a full-blown meal. You know, just we'll define it later, but light snacks are light snacks, and we'll be doing those on singing nights. So, and I think the Dartys will try to have at church when the season comes in a watermelon bust, and so we'll provide the watermelons and we'll get Adam to bust them for us. So anyway, we'll see about that when time comes. Let's talk tonight. We're in the midst of a series, and the series tonight, or the lesson tonight, is victory over fault finding. You know, we are good critics. There was a man one time. He was a taxidermist by trade, and he walked up and he saw an owl in a storefront. And he said, that whoever did that did a terrible job. Said the eyes are off-centered. Said the head's cocked a little bit. The feathers are not the way they should be, and the feet are turned wrong. And about that time, the old owl turned to him and kind of winked, and he realized he was looking at a live owl. We are folks that we can find fault and we can criticize with the best of them. That's become a sport of ours, if you will. A pastime, almost a national pastime. You see, it's easy to see what's wrong with something, but it's very difficult for a lot of us to find what's good. And yet, while we have that issue, I don't want to ask, I don't want to know, but there's about 10 people, there's 10 people pointing to one person. I don't want to know all this. It's like, never mind, I can't tell you that. I really can't tell you. That's what I started to say. I can't. That won't work. But we are folks that we find it easy to criticize. And admittedly, sometimes when things are brought up, we can see another side that those that are saying or those that are doing can't see. We want to look at kind of both sides of the deal, so to speak. We want to understand that finding fault with people, criticizing people, while it seems to be that pastime or that habit, is really not the best thing in the world to be doing, according to at least what God says. We need to find victory over fault finding or criticism. Why do people find fault, though? That's the first thing. And I think there's some, before we get to our victory aspect, we got to do some little preliminaries, if you will. We got to ask ourselves, first of all, why do people find fault? Why is it that folks, seemingly some good folks, that's all they can do is find fault? First of all, there is this idea of self-righteousness. They are the ones that know it all. They are the ones that have all the answers. There was a man once that gave me back a card on something, and he said, the young think they have all the answers and the old do. And he was an older gentleman. And it was like, you don't have all the answers, and I know that for a fact. And I did know it for a fact. But he thought he did. Well, those types of individuals, the individuals have attitude. They have this idea that, you know, I know it all, and I know everything, and I'm the expert. Think about the self-righteous. You remember the story of the publican and the Pharisee in the book of Luke. And remember, the most unlikely of people was the humble person, publican, the most arrogant Pharisee. Lord, I thank you that I am not like this publican. I thank you that I'm not this bad. There was a sense, an air of self-righteousness. Some folks criticize because of self-righteousness. Some folks criticize because of envy. Envy, Solomon says, is rottenness to the bones. But some folks criticize literally because that's their way of getting themselves on an even scale with others. They're envious of the position. They're envious of what people have. They're envious of the way folks maybe carry themselves or whatever it may be. And there's several different things that it can be. But folks find fault with other folks' stuff, if you will, and find fault with other folks, what they say and what they do, because they're envious of individuals. They're envious of them and what they have. Thirdly, some just have a negative spirit about them. If you go back and read in the book of Numbers, and you remember the 12 spies that spied out the land of Canaan, we all know the story, but just sort of a refresher for you. The spies that spy out the land of Canaan, the 10 come back and it says that they made the hearts of the people melt. We can't do it. Joshua and Caleb came back and said, not a problem, we can do it. Well, now I don't know how many of those 10, the Bible doesn't tell us, and so we have no way of knowing, but I wonder how many of them, they just had a negative spirit. It's sort of like the individual that I know of. I know this is a true story. I know this for a fact. There's a particular lady, by the way, loves Suzanne to death and loves me to death, but she served on city council. And she loved us and still does. But she served on city council, and anytime the council was going to spend money for anything, her vote was no. Her vote was definitely no. Now, you have to understand who these people are really to appreciate the story. But anyway, the city built a new city hall. And so the city council decided that for this new city hall, they needed new seats because all of the seats, and they said all the seats, this was before we were living in this town, all the seats were busted and tearing up, and half of them had casters on them and the others didn't. And it was just a mess. Just looked terrible. It fit the old city hall, but it didn't fit the new city hall. And so they were voting to buy new chairs. Well, it came around to her and our beloved friend, and she voted no. Well, all the rest of them voted yes, and so they got new chairs, or they were getting new chairs. They hadn't quite moved into the new facilities yet. And so the next meeting they had, she complained about the vote. They had another meeting, and she complained about the vote. And so about the third time she complained about the vote, another man who also was a member of the church, she's a member of the church. This other man was a member of the church as well, but he's very quiet, soft-spoken, wonderful man who's passed away a few years ago. But he finally looked at her and he called her by name. And he said, tell you what. He said, just for you, we'll save your chair and we'll put it in the facility. We're all getting new chairs. Well, there are folks that they have that negative spirit. Everything's no, everything you can't do. And those folks usually find fault with others. Then there are those that impugn the motives of others. In other words, they think they know. I shared with you not long ago, true story, of a man that was sitting in my office, not here, but in another place, sitting in my office, and as we were talking, he said, I know what you're thinking. And I thought, well, we'll give this a try. And I said, okay, what am I thinking? And he told me, I said, it's not it, you're wrong. I was wrong. Well, I've been wrong about a lot of things, not about him, nor what telling a big lie, as he would call it, and what I was thinking at the time. But some criticize because they impugn the motives of others. Then some criticize because they've become the self-appointed experts. They know it all. They know all the ins and outs and the ups and downs and the what ifs and the what fors, and they've got it all figured out. They've got everything figured out. And so people find fault, and they find fault for a lot of other reasons. But in figuring out the preliminaries, we've also got to find the effects. What are the effects of fault finding? Well, basically, in a nutshell, in one word, it's a destroyer. It destroys. What does fault finding, what is criticism, what does it destroy? It destroys friendships. A friend loves at all times. Brothers born from adversity, Solomon says, but at the same time, too. You ever been criticized up and down by people? Do you want to be around them? Do you want to spend time with them? Do you want to share with them? Do you want to share your life? Do you want to share your information with them? Do you want to share time with them? Do you really? Now, sometimes I have to, let's go out to eat and let's figure out what's going on. But sometimes fault finding can destroy friendships. Also, it can destroy our ability to see good. It destroys our ability to see the good that's going on, to see the good in people's lives, to see exactly what's taking place and how it's taking place. And so really it destroys that ability. It destroys the ability to see the good works of an individual. Bible example. In 1 Samuel, the first chapter, Hannah's praying. Hannah wants a child. Hannah's desirous of a child, and Eli sees her praying in the temple. And what's happening? You remember the story? Her mouth's moving because she's praying in her heart. Nothing comes out of her mouth. He accuses her of being what? Drunk. She's drunk. And she makes sure that he understands that's not true. That it's not true. I'm not drunk. And she convinces him that she is praying fervently for this thing. But isn't it sad that Eli, what he saw was bad, and what he assumed was even worse? Folks that are fault finders, that are often found to be critics of everything we do, are folks that do not see the ability to see the good in others. We're sometimes like a little boy that went up to the preacher one time, and the preacher said, "Man, you're a great little fellow." And he said, "Would you tell my mama that, please? Because she doesn't believe it." Yeah, well, preacher had to tell my mama that a lot. But next, fault finding destroys good works and good works in the kingdom. How many folks stop church work? Church work is really easy to stop in. You ever thought about it? It's really easy to retire in church work, and there's a lot of reasons. Admittedly, there's a lot of reasons, and folks change, and our ministries change because of our time and our talents and our health and a lot of things. So our ministries change. That's fine. But usually, here's how folks stop the ministry, whatever they're doing. They just don't do it anymore. Through the years, through 38 years of preaching, I've seen a lot of folks that started something and never finished it. And then what happens is they don't tell anybody that they've stopped. And their job gets undone for quite a while until finally someone steps up and takes it over. "Oh, yeah, I used to do that." Well, why didn't you tell someone? At Pomona years ago, we had trouble having a deacon. The elders wanted to have a deacon over the building and grounds, just to make sure, didn't have to do a lot, but just what needs fixing, and then try to find somebody that could fix it. They didn't have to fix it themselves. And so I found a bunch of stuff in a closet one time, and I asked about it, and somebody said, "Well, when so-and-so was over the buildings and grounds, they put it there." Well, why didn't they remove it? Well, now you got to remember, Paul, they only lasted a month, but they didn't tell anybody. It was a year later before we realized we didn't have anybody over buildings and grounds. They didn't tell anybody. Well, that presents a problem. Why did they quit? Well, a lot of folks quit because of criticism. They quit because somebody said something, maybe good, intending on it to be good, maybe not so much intending on it to be good. But they criticized. You remember the woman in Mark chapter 14 that anointed the feet of Jesus, doing a good work, wasn't she? Remember Judas? Why wasn't this sold? The money given to the poor. He didn't have to say that. Jesus said, leave her alone. She's done a good work. She's done a good thing. Admittedly, in church work too, we'll sometimes see things differently. You'll see it one way, I'll see it another, and maybe somebody else will even see it a completely different way. But if we stay critical of the effort, we can destroy it. And we can destroy a lot of good works in the kingdom. We can destroy our own happiness. Why? Because we're seeking the things that are bad. Week before last and part of last week, we had 6 friendly birds that stayed around this area, this neighborhood, for about a week and a half, called buzzards. Those buzzards, one day when I went home for lunch, were in my yard. Now, after they left, I found out why they were there. They were there munching on that they had probably brought with them. But they stayed around this area. They stayed down at the creek, Overton Creek. They stayed down there, stayed on the bridge. One night for a walk, I walked up my hill like I told you about a couple weeks ago, walked back down it, kept on going down Sawyer Brown, got to the highway, which is my usual turnaround place, turned around. Guess what? There were my buddies. And I can say that because I had a roommate in college that he and I called each other buzzards. So there was my old roommate and his friends down there. Well, they've since gone, or I haven't seen them in a few days. Hopefully they don't come back. But see, folks have to understand when they're looking for the dead carcasses, that's all they see. And soon they're looking for what's rotten. They're looking for what's terrible. They're looking for the bad. And they can't be happy until they find the bad. Only to say, see, I told you. The critic needs to understand what he's destroyed. He's destroyed his own happiness in his own search for finding peace and tranquility and finding easiness. He's looking for something to get off on. And so we need to be careful. Well, let's go to the victory. Let's go to the positive. That's enough of the negative. Let's go to the positive and let's ask ourselves, how can we gain victory? I want us to look at this from 2 aspects. If you are the giver of criticism, you are the giver of finding fault with others, I want you to stop and think about some things. I want you to think about, first of all, think before you speak. Swift to hear, slow to speak, and slow to anger. James said in James chapter 1, verse 12. We could also say, be careful. Measure your words. Think about what you say. You know, you've heard the old saying, probably from a carpenter. If you hadn't, I'll share it with you. It's the idea of measure twice and cut once. Right? You measure something twice, you get the exact measurement, and because you're cutting a piece maybe to put it in something, and you need the exact measurement, so what do? You measure it twice. Maybe where you're going to put it, you measure it twice, and then you measure your board twice. But you only cut once. Why? Because if you cut it too short, then you've ruined your piece. You've ruined what you're putting together. So many times we are very quick to speak. Solomon makes the statement that the wise man, he thinks about his words. The wise man, he says, restrains, in Proverbs chapter 10, verse 19, the wise man restrains his words. He holds them back. He thinks. He thinks before he speaks. He puts a little thought into it. Do you remember what is said in Matthew chapter 7? Judge not that you be not judged, for with what judgment you judge, you should be judged. For with what measure you meet, it should be measured to you. Here's what Jesus said. Be careful judging other individuals. Be careful thinking other individuals are wrong. Be careful thinking other individuals are not doing what they should be doing. Now, when I think of that, I think of this wonderful plaque my beautiful wife gave me years ago. She gave it to me. No, we weren't. We were dating at the time. And for my birthday, I got this little plaque, and it has a beautiful hound dog on it. And underneath it, it says, those of you that think you know everything are not as smart as as we are. Something to that effect. See, I'm already being told I'm wrong. When I pull it out, because I still got it, she'll say, yeah, no, I still got the plaque. that haven't thought before they speak. Jesus said, judge not, that you don't be judged. But then he goes on to say, which of you, having a plank in your own eye, and I'm paraphrasing now, stop and try to consider the splinter that's within your brother's eye. That's foolish, isn't it? It's foolish to think that you might have a board in your eye, but your brother has a splinter in his eye, and yet you're more concerned with the splinter in his eye than you are the board that's in your own eye. Jesus said you can't do that. You've got to be sure that you consider what's on your life before you speak. Look the good, not the bad. That makes sense. We've already talked a little bit about that. But if you're a giver of criticism, think you speak. Look at the good and not the bad. Look to see what the good is. What is good with this? What good can come out of that? See, begin to think optimistically instead of pessimistically. Begin to think about the glass being half full instead of half empty. Think about the possibilities that you haven't seen yet that could work. You don't know it all. They don't know it all, admittedly. And so you have to come to a balance of the two. But look for the good instead of the bad. Thirdly, put yourself in their shoes. Do you remember the last time you were criticized? Do you remember how you felt? Do you remember how it took place and how it hurt your heart? Because maybe this individual was having a bad day, and so they came off grumbling and complaining. Maybe they didn't offer it with a smile. Maybe they didn't offer it with a hug. Maybe they offered it with sarcasm. Maybe they offered it in a hurtful way. Now, maybe at the same time, too, they didn't mean it that way. They meant it out of love. They meant it out of compassion, but it came off wrong. Well, maybe that's because they didn't think before they speak. But put yourself in their shoes before you speak. Have I looked at the good? And will this, what I'm about to offer, accomplish good? And so we need to be careful. If you're giving criticism, we have to be careful. But what about the individual that receives that fault? What about the individual that receives that criticism? What about the individual that receives those words of hurt? Those words that really impugn the actions and the activities and the thoughts that we have. Well, when we receive that, what do? Well, we need to first of all pray for the individual. Pray for them. Pray for them that they can have a more loving, compassionate spirit. Pray for them that maybe something's going on. You know, a lot of folks that tend to be on the negative side are folks that are in pain. Some of them are in pain physically. There's pain in their life, and we don't know about it. But there's pain, and so consequently it causes them to lash out. But then sometimes there's pain emotionally. Today we keep talking about mental health in our day and age. And yes, in many ways it's maybe more fragile than at other times. And there's a lot of extenuating circumstances on that and why that exists. But at the same time, too, they're going through some mental anguish. Maybe we know about it or maybe we don't know about it. We need to consider that. So we need to pray for that individual and pray that they'll be able to slow down, but pray for them that they'll find the good and they'll see the good. Handle yourself so that there are no regrets. Handle yourself so that you can be sure that later on don't feel upset. In the book of Proverbs, 29th chapter, verse 11, the fool vents all of his words, but guess what the wise man does? The wise man holds them back. The wise man doesn't say everything he thinks. I had a lady once invited me to her house. She was a sweet lady. She was, let's be honest, she was sour on the world. She was sour on everything. She had this attitude: if I think it, I'm going to say it. It didn't matter what it was. Called me up one day, and I had preached a sermon. I could even tell you what the subject is. It doesn't really matter, but I preached a sermon, and strange thing, it was one of the most complimented sermons in the 5 years that I was at this congregation. She called me up one day. She said, "Can you come to my house?" I said, "Yes, ma'am." Went to her house. By the way, I call her first name. Her first name was Joy. If there ever was a misnomer, that was it. Her son just passed away here last year. I just found out the other day. And I loved her son, loved her, but her son lived on. He was really a good man as well. But anyway, Miss Joy, yes, ma'am, I'll be at your house. Went to her house. You know that sermon you preached Sunday? Yes, ma'am. It stunk. Great, this is going to go, this visit's going to go well, you know. And then she told me why it stunk, and I realized why it stunk. The subject of the sermon was on elders, and I just preached about elders and how important they were. And to be honest, she didn't like our elders. Why? Because she was not a Joy. She was named Joy, but she was not a Joy. Well, when folks come at you like that, what's the best thing to do? Shut up. Yes, ma'am. Okay. And move on. You know, we always think we have to defend ourselves. But the old saying of sticks and stones will break my bones, but words will never hurt me. It hurts. And I'm not going to deny that words don't hurt. There's power. Solomon says that there's power in the tongue. But yet, at the same time, too, they can only last for a little while if we're willing to dismiss them and move on. And so what we need to do is handle ourselves. Be slow to speak. Handle ourselves in such a way that there's no regrets. And so what we do is we give thought. Give some thought to what you're about to say. Count to 10 before you say it. Think about it. Give some thought to it. Think about what's going on and maybe why this individual's doing this. Think about what you can say and how you can respond and how you can respond in kind. He who hates correction will die. And so we have to be sure that we're individuals that have given some thought to the criticism. You see, you don't know it all. And what they say may be very true. It may be right. Maybe you haven't thought about that. There was one eldership that I worked with that a lot of times when I suggest something in elders meetings, I try to give both sides, at least as I have thought it through. And then, of course, I'm always open to what the elders say, or like here, we meet with the deacons as well, what the deacons say, and listen to them, what they have to say, have their input and have their insight into it, because don't know it all. I had one eldership once that I presented something, and I said, now here's this. And they started talking about it, and I said, but now here's this over here. You got to think about this. And one of the elders said, why do you always do that? I said, because I've had time to think about this. You've had, 2 minutes? I've had a month. And in this, I'm trying to give you what I think you're going to hear from both sides. And so you might want to delay this for a month. You might want to delay it for a week. You might want to delay it for a year. You might want to tell me no. But I want you to know what I think the folks that are for it will say and what the folks that don't like it will say. Okay, I understand now. We need to stop and think, does this bear some truth? Is what they're saying something that is true that I need to consider, that I haven't considered? And so we give it thought. For the wise man, he hates discipline, or he loves discipline. He understands that sometimes he must move forward and he must forgive. Hardest thing to do, isn't it? We're going to talk about, Lord willing, next week, victory over unforgiveness, as we talk about forgiveness in a kind of a negative light, but we're going to try to spin it positively. Hard to forgive people for what they say to you. Hard to forgive them for the hurt that they cause to you, to your soul, to maybe even your family, to those that you know, to those that you love. You can talk about me, but don't talk about my family. You can tear me to shreds, but you're not going to do that to my family. But when they do, when they tear me to shreds, it hurts. Because don't want to fail anybody, right? And so then what do we have to do? We have to forgive. Why? Because Paul said, as much as lies in you, live peaceably with all men. Romans 12, verse 18. And so we have to learn to say, okay, I'm letting you off the hook. I'm letting this go. I'm not holding this against you. I'm not holding it from a standpoint of holding it against you so that I can come back and get you with something else. We're going to let it go. We're going to smile. We're going to be finished with it. It's going to be done. So when you're criticized, here's the idea. Move forward. In life, move forward. Back a few years ago, I developed a series of lessons. I haven't preached them here. And if I were to, I'd preach them a whole lot differently. But nevertheless, it was based on the theme of move forward. That's life. Move forward. Move forward in life. And so when folks criticize you, learn to move forward. It's good to have buddies. It's good to be buddies. It's good to make buddies. And that's what we need to be in life. We all, Malachi asked the question, don't we all have the same Father? The answer is yes. We all do. We all have the same Father. We may not see eye to eye. We may not agree. We may not see how this should be done or that should be done, or we may see where folks are lacking. But we need to learn to move forward, to like each other, to love each other. And that when you don't like something that I've done, come tell me in love. If you bring strawberry pie or chocolate chess pie or strawberry cake, I guess I should say. No, strawberry pie, I eat that too. You bring that, it'll go down a whole lot easier. Chocolate chess is good enough, though. It's real good. So, just remember, you don't always have to tell everybody everything you know and everything you think. And when they unload on you, just give them a nod, give them a wink, give them a hug. Try to get over it as best you can. This evening, thankfully, God is not in the criticism business. Thankfully, God is in the forgiving business. And this evening, if you're not a New Testament child of God, or you need to change the direction of your life, or maybe you've been involved in the critic business too long, and in doing that, you've really hurt some folks, and you've hurt some things, good things, and you want to acknowledge that and ask for the prayers of the church. Whatever the case may be, if you need to respond to the Lord's invitation, I want you to do so. While together we stand and sing.